Welcome to episode 152 of the Campus Comics Cast, where you can feel free to share your password to this podcast with all of your friends, because unlike Netflix, we don't plan to charge you any extra per episode. My name is Scott Reed, and I am joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison
and Shad Schubert.
And of course, this is the Campus Comics Cast, the official podcast for Muddy Monster Comics, located at 1422 Walnut Street in Murfreesboro, Illinois. And I'm going to do a little bit of self-promotion just to start this episode off. But I dropped off about 3,000 comic books at Muddy Monster Comics last week. So if you're in the market to dig through dollar books, there are probably 10 to 12,000 comics there between what I just dropped off and what Mike already has in the shop. So yeah, you should definitely make a point to stop in and check it out. So this episode, we're planning on talking about Truth, Red, White, and Black, and then wrap up the episode with a review of Rachel Rising Volume 1, and then, of course, a CLZ Shake. But I guess the big news for most people, not for us, because we like the comics more than the movies, but that being said, we like to talk about the movies as well. We finally do have some information from DC, specifically James Gunn and, okay, is it Peter Safran? Is that right? Yeah, Peter Safran. All right, about what the future holds for the DC movie universe. And let's just say it's an unexpected lineup. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't know what I necessarily expected, but there's definitely an approach that isn't like, let's get all the big dominoes and hit them, which is good. I'm thankful for that for sure. But yeah, if you would have said, I guess with Gunn, with his history of his casting with the Suicide Squad and his handle of the Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess you wouldn't be surprised that he would pull some random characters and try not to just hit all the big ones. But yeah, it's an interesting lineup for sure.
Mike,
I think I would have been more disappointed if he hit us with the same, the go-tos, the Trinity, and
only Batman, Wonder Woman.
Yeah, and maybe a couple just for good measure, a couple other properties. But this at first glance, when you look at the announcements, you think, what's the connective tissue between all of these? But really, they're not going to sit there and tell you right off the bat. It's the fun of it is seeing it build as it goes. And I'm for one, I'm not going to be critical in advance. I'm going to reserve judgment on things until I get a chance to see them. This is the most positive I've felt about upcoming DC movies or TV shows or animation forever, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the first time that we've had someone that's been I don't know what the right word would be, the hawker, the guy that's promoting.
The Feige,
yeah. And Gunn's not afraid to get out there and put himself on the line. I don't know if Safran's sort of the guy behind the scenes, but Peter Gunn is not afraid to say what his plans are, or at least as much as he can. And if you watch the video that he put out, it's pretty refreshing to see that, because for years it's just been guesswork, and you get little snippets of this and that, and who's in charge of what. And it's I think even in his video he mentions that they DC in the past was kind of giving out these IPs like candy, just whoever whatever creator that gave him a little bit of
couple of bucks
and a wink, they're like, oh, would you like this? So I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, and the fact that he even called Warner Brothers out for like how poorly they treated Cavill through all of this. I mean, he said a lot of things. We'll see if he's able to stick around, because we have to wonder about Warner Brothers executives, if they're going to start taking that personal, and if they feel like they're being attacked too much.
Sure.
If they've been willing to take over some of the past projects like Snyder. I enjoyed the Snyderverse until it got derailed by Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
So, they could derail this just as easy. It just takes, one memo to some secretary typing it out, and this all can change. But
the good news is that the CEO of Warner Entertainment is different now too, right? So whatever major stones are thrown from James Gunn aren't aimed at a current CEO. It's aimed at a past CEO. So that helps a little bit.
That's true. And I don't think it's a secret. This isn't like a big reveal that there's been problems with the way DC or Warner Brothers has rolled out the DC properties. So he's not telling us anything we don't know already as fans.
Yeah. It's funny though that these movies that were disappointments, most of them made between $750 to $1 billion, and they were still disappointments.
Yeah,
that's neither here nor there. So the first chapter is what they are referring to as Gods and Monsters, which we talked about before we started recording, is a terrible storyline, at least the one that I remember for Gods and Monsters. But that being said, the first reveal is for an animated series on HBO Max, Creature Commandos. Now, who, if you had been a betting person, would have bet Creature Commandos was the first reveal for this new lineup?
It wasn't on my card.
I wouldn't have said, if someone asked me 2 weeks ago, pick 10 DC properties that will be put into production like this, it wouldn't have been that. But I have heard recently someone say this on a podcast, how it would be such a good, these guys, this team would be a lot of fun to do. I don't know where I heard it from, but if you look at the animation still, it looks like it's pretty good art. Mm-hmm. The only critical thing I have is that there's only 2 members of this team that are actually part of the original Creature Commandos, and that's Frankenstein and G.I. Robot.
Okay.
And the rest of them are all like Dr. Phosphorus is a Batman villain. Bride of Frankenstein, I don't know. She may have had an appearance at some point. It's not like I collected all of the GI combats.
Or was her first appearance? Would it have been in Seven Sons of Victory, that Grant Morrison story, or did she predate that?
No, I don't remember her ever predating that. I mean, the original Creature Commandos were basically your Universal, your Frankenstein, Dracula, and Wolfman. But Weasel
and Mummy, right?
Sorry.
And the Mummy, right? Was one of.
Oh yeah, the Mummy. Yeah, it was. And then G.I. Robot came in like a little bit later, but most of these are they came about from other parts of the DC universe, like the Weasel, and I don't know who's that. I forgot who. I mean, you got Rick Flag from the Suicide Squad, but
that's Rick Flag Sr.
Senior, okay, yeah, because this is probably based in the 1940s.
And I'm assuming Weasel's in there so that he could give his brother
a job.
Another job.
That's true. I actually thought of that.
I was going to say that too, but you didn't say that.
In everything Gunn's been involved in, his brother is at a job. That's right.
Yep. All right, so next. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I think it'll be fun, and I'm glad to see the animated universe be part of this.
So next up is Waller. This is a live action HBO Max, all right, series. All right. And it's going to apparently sit between season 1 and season 2 of Peacemaker. So I guess we're going to get a second season of Peacemaker. But this is Viola Davis coming back as Amanda Waller. So we can't fault the casting there for sure.
No.
But, so I guess probably our big concern is, is Waller going to be too influential? Is this going to be the Waller of Black Adam, or is this going to be a different Waller, right? Where, Superman was beholden to her as opposed to the more, underhanded side of Amanda Waller. So
I think we're going to see the Waller we've seen in Peacemaker season 1 and in the Suicide Squad, the nasty undermining Waller.
Yeah, the not so altruistic. She's not like, she's just
you
she's
scratch
not
my
just
back,
a
I'll
spy
scratch
leader.
yours.
Right? Yeah, right. She's
not gonna be that way.
pretty underhanded. I think I just heard that she just is a recent winner of all 4 of the main awards.
Yeah, she's an EGOT. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, DC understands that, look, we got Viola Davis and we need to hang on to her. She's going to bring in some viewers that we might not get otherwise. And she's a strong female lead. And just we know just how good of an actress or actor that Viola Davis is. So, and she's dipped her toes into just about every part of the DC universe too.
All right, so next up, we got the first live action movie. And they are bringing in one of the big guns here, but not in the traditional way. We got Superman Legacy. And did they give a time? They didn't actually. July of 2025. So we're over 2 years out for the first movie that is part of this, part of this release.
And where they say in so many words in this interview that the reboot will happen with their first big project, and then they also refer to Superman Legacy as their first big project. So the whatever you want to, the chapter 1 begins with Superman Legacy. So that as far as the words, and I don't feel like they're going to use their words. Those words were so specific that it's like that's got to mean something. So whatever happens pre-Legacy is up for grabs, which is, it's interesting because I want my chapters to begin and end, right? So with Waller being part of this and Waller being in between seasons 1 and season 2 of Peacemaker and existing in the Suicide Squad movies, it's like, okay, so Suicide Squad does or does not exist in this timeline. And it sounds like they get to kind of pick and choose. And that's probably the only kind of beef through this for me is like, I want a clean start and a clean stop, because as soon as you allow Margot Robbie to be Harley Quinn in that, then there's a lot of other movies that become canon based on the actor. But I guess you can't think by actor. You got to think by timeline, I guess.
Yeah. Who knows? So it's a little muddy though. Yeah. Anything else to add on Superman?
Let me throw in a couple things. From what I understand, this is meant to be not an origin. It's meant to be him, sort of like what we just reviewed, the Superman for all seasons. He's just coming of age. He's learning just how his belief system doesn't necessarily line up with the world, and he's trying to balance his Kryptonian heritage with all of that. And I think that would be an interesting and good way to put it, or to put it out. I had a second thing, but I totally forgot what it was. It would. Oh, I think I know what it was. The image here of Frank Whiteley and Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. If I remember, that wasn't really an early in his career type of story. So
actually, it leads to the end of his career.
Right. Yeah. Right. So anyway, but the other thing is, okay, if this is the launching point, it's okay. If it's the launch, it's going to be, as soon as it launches, everything's going to be rapid fire after that, because they can't wait to develop everything else after this movie.
It's 2 movies and 2 series a year as their timeline.
Yeah. So, and it's Superman. It's he's the heart of the DC universe. It has to really start with him.
I'm excited for it if they do it right. I mean, I want a Superman movie I will like. I wasn't a big Man of Steel fan.
So you're just wrong, but that's okay.
It was, for lack of a better word, it was just so dark. I want something a little brighter. I want a bright suit. I want a bright red and blue suit.
Yeah. I understand the disaster porn argument of Man of Steel, but I also like the quote unquote realistic take.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but so next up, we have Lanterns, which is being described as a true detective mystery type story with 2 Green Lanterns, those 2 Green Lanterns being John Stewart and Hal Jordan. This is also going to be an HBO Max series. So
I feel like we've been threatened this for like a decade, so I'm excited for it to finally happen. It's like there's always been a Green Lantern TV show, buddy cop, that was on the rise, and it just never happened. So if this happens, I'm excited for this.
Well, I'd never heard it being described as a buddy cop show. They kind of basically scrapped what they were originally going to do with this Green Lantern series and went to the buddy cop, is how I understood it. But maybe that's how maybe I'm misinterpreting something. So
Yeah,
I don't remember either.
But anyway, okay. So I guess the one thing to say about it is, based on some of these announcements, I guess I'm keeping my HBO Max subscription going for a while.
Or at least you take a break for a couple of years, and then in 2025,
maybe get back on. Yeah. This one was a surprise announcement to me. The Authority live action movie, because this is not a DC original property, right? Yeah. I mean, this is, so I don't know if they're trying to throw Jim Lee a bone, because if I remember right, this is a Jim Lee creation, is it not? So so it comes out of Wildstorm, and they are morally gray characters, as how they like to describe them. But yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. Were surprised, I think, by this announcement. What about you guys?
This will appease the Snyder fans, the ones that aren't going to get there. This is a fictional universe should be as diverse as the real world. So this shows that it's not, the DC universe isn't going to be all like Superman, or all like the, Amanda Waller or Green Lantern. You're going to have teams, or, characters that are morally ambiguous, and I can't think of a better team to really represent that. And plus, I like the idea they're going out on a limb. Mm-hmm. These are not familiar. I mean, no more familiar than what the Guardians of the Galaxy were.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. It definitely seemed like the most James Gunn choice.
Sure. Yeah. And, now in the DC comics, we had the Superman and the Authority miniseries, and then a lot of those members joined up with Superman on that War World saga or whatever. And that's the most I'd ever read of Midnighter and Apollo and Manchester Black. I knew about them. I knew of these characters, but it's these are characters that have a lot of potential, and I think it'll be great to see them on a big screen.
I'm going to guess, here's my prediction, that in this movie, a large portion of these characters will be dead by the end. I'm just going to predict it. I'm just going to say it right now. So, and speaking of a series that's going to end up in a lot of dead characters by the end, Paradise Lost. This is also going to be an HBO Max series, and if they're describing it as a Game of Thrones type story, that tells you a lot that you need to know. This is obviously going to take place before Wonder Woman, so it's going to go back in a DC history, and it looks like it's also going to be prior to the Mascara becoming solely a society for women. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's, I don't know, Game of Thrones style. I don't know. There definitely is a more adult tone to some of these items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something else I noted or thought about, is that they're running the gamut on movie ratings here, from PG-13 to potentially R. And this would be, if they're using Game of Thrones as a descriptor, it's obviously going to be full of violence and maybe even just sex and whatever else. But it sounds like if they, well, it's one thing to put this forward with this promotion, but then to actually do that'll be impressive if they can.
Shad, anything to add on that?
Nope. I think that, yeah.
All right. Next up, we got Brave and the Bold, and this is actually a character I've been waiting to see. So this is a live action movie, oddly titled, I think, for the characters they're focusing on here, which is of course Damian Wayne. I would, Brave and the Bold means Batman and somebody, or Green Lantern and somebody to me. But we get to focus on Damian Wayne Robin, which I think is a very interesting character. I like the tie-in to Batman's history and Batman's past, and Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul. So we'll see how much of that they actually bring in. So I think this is, like, maybe other than the Superman movie, the one that's the best fit for what I would expect out of these DC projects moving forward.
To me, having Damian Wayne is the humanizing factor for Batman. I mean, a lot of people that don't read the comics, that just only know Batman from the movies or TV or whatever, they think of him as just the Dark Knight detective. You know, he fights crime, but him having a kid because of a dalliance with one of his greatest villains' daughter. That's like, oh, I mean, I was just describing this all to my wife. She's my sounding board, and she's like, what? He's got a kid? Yeah, like, yeah, he really does. So it's I think this is going to draw some attention, and I'm probably as excited for this as anything. But I'm pretty excited about all of it. So
yeah. Chad?
We haven't had a live action. We've only had one live action Robin in like
Jerry
the last
Clooney?
30 years, right? With Chris O'Donnell.
O'Donnell,
yeah.
With the bat nipples.
And we've never had a kid live action Robin. So I'm super pumped for that. And they also promise more of the Bat family. So, and I think if I remember right in Gunn's little presentation, he's like, we have failed to give you more than just Batman in a Batman movie all this time. So like, we're going to give you more of the Bat family. And it's like, oh, finally, that'll be really cool to see all of them, or at least more of them, I guess.
So next is the one thing, Mike, that I think you probably are potentially more excited about than anything else on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Booster Gold live action HBO Max series might go.
They used to I think even oh my gosh, what's his name that played Peacemaker? John Cena. He described the character of Peacemaker as a douchey Captain America. Okay, that's true, but I don't know that he can't be outdone by Booster Gold in that way, except it's not patriotism or anything like that. It's what they describe him as a superhero's imposter. He's the guy he really did it all for himself, and yet he ends up being a hero in the end. So seeing that character growth, I think, will be a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, from the 80s forward, there aren't a ton of new characters that have maintained that level of popularity, and I think it's the right choice for them to put him, especially in a TV series. I think it'll be great.
I don't know. I think Booster Gold does not have a super high level of popularity. And I think a lot of people, he's kind of like the other guy, he's not, he's not going to carry a title on his own. Like lots of other characters can. He's kind of best known for the team up with Blue Beetle, Blue and Gold, but that again, they're taking a risk on a character that's not as mainstream, not one of the big, 5 or 7, that DC has. So.
Yeah, and by popularity, I think I mean more in the he has had his own title a few times, and they weren't just they weren't like 5 issues and canceled. Yeah. So, and the whole premise, I think people can get on board with,
And we are setting up. I mean, with the Blue Beetle movie technically being prior to the restart, they have the choice to pull that into canon, even though I know that's not the Blue Beetle that is normally teaming up with Booster Gold. We do have the ability to get a Blue and Gold team up with this series.
I can see Ted Kord appearing in the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle movie that's coming. Was it late this year or next year?
It's late this year, August 18th, 2023.
So I can see, and I think in the comics, I haven't read a single one of them, but I think Ted Kord's more of like a mentor to him in that. But I can see even a mention of Michael Carter or Booster Gold in that movie. That some of these movies that are still on the slate, everything from Shazam to Flash, which is supposed to be like this is the reboot movie, to Aquaman and
might say it's the Flashpoint.
Oh yeah, there you go. But that they're plugging in different scenes, maybe deleting a few things just to adjust to this new plan.
Yeah.
Next up, we got another live action movie, which we just reviewed, right? Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, that series from Tom King. Now, just because we're taking the title Doesn't mean necessarily they're going to follow along strictly with that particular storyline.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting more than just Superman. We're going to start the Superman family here in the movies. Live action film with Supergirl. Do you think they'll stick with Supergirl or will it become Superwoman?
I think they'll stick with Supergirl.
I think so too. I think that has more. Yeah.
Is I've seen Tom King's name thrown around as in being part of James Gunn's staff, as like part of this mind trust of people that he's got in his inner circle even.
Oh, I bet he is. I've heard the same thing. In fact, I've heard the same thing about Grant Morrison too.
Okay.
When it comes to the Batman or the Brave and the Bold.
Yeah.
I think honestly, guys, I think really Gunn and Safran listened to our episode where we reviewed this, and then they read the book, and then they said, yes. Let's just greenlight it. But it's pretty gratifying to know that we all, I think, thought. Well, I don't remember exactly what everybody thought. I know what I thought, but
we liked it.
Yes, it was just one of the best books I've read in a long time, and I think this is where you'll see Lobo. If we see a Jason Momoa Lobo, it might be in this movie.
Well, surely he can be a better Lobo than he was in Aquaman. That's all I can say.
I bet he
can. Be
can.
A perfect Lobo.
I think he could. Yes.
He doesn't have to. He can actually keep that same personality and be Lobo.
I'd rather see him as Lobo than Aquaman.
Yeah,
I would.
I'm good there. So, and then the last thing on this list, live action movie. Another surprise to me, Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Yes. They're gonna bust out the rubber suit from the 70s or from the 80s.
Right.
Wow. Feel sorry for the actors got to wear it, but
yeah.
And they've early conversation. I guess James Mangold is potentially directing on this.
Oh, okay.
Has been the name that's floated around. I had heard so.
No release date on this, but this is going to lean more, we hope, to the horror side of things.
Yeah.
So a little darker. Little darker story.
I mean, with DC's got a pretty rich horror history, and we've seen some of that with the Sandman Netflix series, and then all the material that comes in with Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. I mean, the ideas that he put forth there, it's just ripe for the picking. I didn't really anticipate this either, and I can't say I'm the hugest Swamp Thing fan, but I think it will. I'd be interesting to see where it goes, and it's in what order it comes in too, and mostly to see where it introduces other characters, because I always thought that was a good part of kind of like Sandman, introducing the DC characters.
Yeah, because I guess the way that these are listed isn't necessarily has any kind of reflection on release date or timeline at all whatsoever.
Only a few of them have approximate dates on them in this initial announcement. So,
and that's all tentative. They said anything can change. So. But
all right, so big question, Shad. Which of these are you most looking forward to?
Supergirl.
Supergirl.
Hands down. I mean, the way that it looked was so cool with the art. Who's that? Bill Quist. Is that who the artist was?
Everly.
Yeah. That I'm excited to see what that vision looks like on the screen for sure.
Yeah, I think that's. Oh, never mind. I'm going someplace different. All right, Mike. What about you? What are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I think my default would have been Supergirl, but I'm going to say The Authority, because I think it's going to be bringing something. Well, it's unexpected, of course, but I think there's really good characters on that team, and it's a team movie, and I like teams. So, but man, it's hard to pick from. There's none I would be just totally disappointed in, but yeah, I have to say that.
Well, I'm going to go with Brave and the Bold because I'm interested to see Damian Wayne on the screen. So I think that's the one that I'm gonna pick. So all right. So okay, one more big question for you guys. Which universe are you now more excited about for the future? Marvel or DC?
Chad, you better go first.
DC for sure. I mean, I'm always a DC guy first. So if there's a plan for DC, I'm gonna root for DC.
Well, you kind of just said exactly what I'm always a DC guy first because that's what I kind of cut my teeth on. But I'm also like one of those. I always root for the underdog. I mean, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan for crying out loud. So it's not just that though. It's because I feel like for the first time in a long time, there's something really to look forward to. And it's not. This is not. Everything's relative. Nothing. This does not at all diminish the accomplishments of the Marvel Cinematic Universe because they have been immense. If anything else, this sets the bar at a level where we as the consumers are expecting something better than what we've gotten from DC all these years. So it's I mean, Marvel's hit its peak and now it's got to figure out how to just at least maintain its plateau, of decent stuff.
Yeah, DC has no place to go really but up.
Yeah, I mean that's
Well, I'm gonna stick with Marvel because I would actually like to have seen DC kind of build around some of their marquee characters as opposed to some of their lesser known characters. So we don't have a whole lot of, there's not any Wonder Woman really. We only have a little bit of Batman. We got kind of a off to the side Superman story. So I'm still in the Marvel camp, but I'll reverse what you guys said. I'm a Marvel guy though, so
yeah.
And the Marvel guys have been slipping, or Marvel movies have been slipping a little bit because of the focus on comedy over, action and storytelling. However, I'm looking at this slate of DC stuff and thinking, man, they're going way too far to the mature, not for kids side of this, which is not going to do anything to improve comic books, purchases in stores or anything like that, getting young people in to read comics because Marvel hasn't had any R-rated, movies yet. We're probably looking at several R's on some of these projects and strong TV matures on some of the TV projects. So
I would say I think maybe only a couple of R's at the most, but I see the Brave and the Bold as being the one where because there's a lot of room in between the saccharine, sweet, funny, whatever, and the dark. So I think that there's got to be some movement in between there. Yeah. Hopefully it's not going to be one extreme or the other.
Right.
Well, to me, like Warner Brothers has this thing. Okay, talk like the most recent, well, not the most recent, but like the Batman. They literally added one F-bomb to the movie to make it PG-13 because they didn't want to release a PG movie.
Yeah.
I hate it whenever companies and directors do that because they think, oh, a PG rating is not a serious film or a PG is not gonna get us to the dollar point that we want, right? So decisions like that take precedent over the value of the story or providing it to a wider audience, So,
yeah.
All right. Well, anything else to say about this before we move on?
Well, my favorite announcement was that we finally acknowledged Elseworlds and said that Joker and the Batman are both in an Elseworlds type scenario and that they'll continue to be in that scenario and that they will choose as they have time to focus on other storylines in the future. If it's really good and isn't within the same world, they will acknowledge Elseworld titles. And I thought that was really cool because, I mean, that's what we've kind of been saying this whole time anyways, is like Joker's an Elseworld story. And so they actually acknowledging that and calling it what it is, it was like, okay, good. That's what I was hoping for.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, let's move on to Truth, Red, White, and Black. All right, and this is a series that kind of gives an origin to the other Captain America, and this time that Captain America is not Steve Rogers, but rather Isaiah Bradley, and amongst a group of other characters as well. And I was trying to get to page 1 here so I can go over the credits for this, right? So this is wrong page. Sorry. Come on. The iPad is not cooperating with me at the moment. So somebody have page 1 up.
It's written by Robert Morales.
Thank you.
And artist is Kyle Baker with lettering by JG and Comicraft Wes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see a color. Maybe Kyle Baker does his own coloring, perhaps.
Probably, because he's listed just as artist, not as penciler or inker or anything
Correct.
like that. So he's probably doing the full thing. So all right, so this is a 7-issue series, and I think Shad, you're going to give us the rundown for the first 3. I guess just pause between in case there's anything we want to say on each of these episodes or each of these issues.
You got it. The pause will work because I'll have to get to the next one.
There you go. Give you some time to get there. Yeah,
that's right. All right, issue 1. Towards the end of the Great Depression, teen newlyweds Isaiah and Faith Bradley attend Negro Week at 1940s New York's World Fair, where they learn the future for colored Americans may not be quite as bright as the hype. In Philadelphia, black communist Maurice Canfield confronts his mother about his twin passions, distinguishing himself from his father's wealth and establishing social equality in the white man's world. And in a Cleveland pool hall, lifelong soldier Sergeant Lucas Evans explains to an old pal, Dallas Huxley, how he was busted in rank over a racially motivated incident with a Caucasian superior officer. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor forever alters their fate. Sergeant Evans, drowning in his sorrows in booze and staring down the barrel of his own gun, discovers a renewed sense of purpose. Maurice, found guilty and protesting America's entry into World War II, learns that the clout behind his family name grants him the choice between a lengthy prison sentence and military enlistment, and Isaiah, now an Army private heading off to basic training, promises to return to a very pregnant Faith.
All right, so I guess the first thing I want to comment on is like the art. The art is very cartoony. You know,
yes.
I don't know. I always use the same term for things that I don't really know how to describe as very stylized. I always call it very stylized. So this is very stylized. There are points where the art, like sometimes it's like really, really good, and then sometimes it's not so good. And I don't know if it's I don't know what it is, but it just it bounces around quite a bit. The art
loose is the term I use.
Okay,
it's
there you
very
go.
Loose.
That's a good term. Now, with regards to the artwork, the thing that bothers me maybe most, especially about this issue, is what is that supposed to be on the side of Lucas Evans' head?
I don't know.
I think it's a birthmark.
You think it's a birthmark, or is it like a wound?
I thought it was like a war wound. Was what I was assuming.
It could be, but
is it
that's
like
true.
that little
scar tissue,
Charlie Brown hair?
No. I think it's now that you say it, it could be a wound. I think that has to be it.
Yeah, because they got that line
scar
that goes
tissue.
through his eye.
Yeah, some people have. Yeah, some people the scar tissue builds up more, and that's because he was in World War I.
Yeah,
I think that's very possible, and not just a birthmark.
Okay, all right. That bothered me because it's like so unclear of what that is supposed to be.
Yeah, because the art's that loose, like Shad said, and
But the action was a little hard to follow with that art sometimes too. Like when it would get a little loose like that, I found out myself having a hard time like kind of figuring out what exactly was going on. I liked it at times. It's not like I didn't like it, but I think it's the first time that I've maybe read something with Kyle Baker art on it. But I was like, I don't know if this story was the best fit for his artwork. Maybe
not. He's the one that did Plastic Man, didn't he? Do that series?
Yeah.
Wrote and drew it.
I don't know.
yeah, because I was looking up because I was like, I don't think I've seen this guy's work before, but it was kind of Ren and Stimpy-ish. It reminded me of if I had to pick somebody. But yeah, I saw Plastic Man was one of his big credits.
Well, what Scott said about stylized is his go-to descriptor for the art, that's exactly what I wrote. I think what I said here was, it seems like I've used the phrase historically accurate and stylized art a lot lately, and this book is both of those things, and not just your everyday accurate, like hitting the right years. This Robert Morales, I mean, if in that back part of the book, the back matter, that's my favorite part of the book. I think is that seeing how all the research he did, and the art. It's yeah. I agree that at first it was like, I don't know, it's kind of off-putting, but I think it told the story well enough that I really was on board with it pretty quickly.
And I think some of this is, this is a story that represents, in the Marvel universe, some of the terrible things that happened to Black Americans at times throughout our history. And while this specific event is not true, there were lots of similar events that were true, and they'll hit on, some of those things as we work through the story. But one thing that I think is interesting, okay, so if you go back and you read early issues of the Spirit, right, for example, you have this very, I'll just go and say, offensive caricature of like a black sidekick in those Spirit books. So now we're getting this basically black created properties where we get the very caricature of like a white, the carnival barker there in this first issue. And then we'll meet Private Merritt later on.
Oh yeah.
This caricature of the white guy. So I think it's I like it, and obviously it's fair game.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you kind of see that turnaround.
That's true. That's true. I hadn't thought of it like that, because the Barker's the first one you see like that, and then, like you said, Lieutenant Merritt, he's just
he's horrible.
He's like really the worst. Really the most blatantly racist and obnoxious character.
Offenses,
yeah. But this is a story about what happened in Marvel's history with black creators doing the work behind this book, and it needs to be recognized for that, if for no other reason. But
so
issue 2?
No, let me throw 2 comments in there. I was just kind of piggybacking on Scott's earlier, but one thing I liked is that this Negro Week was a real thing in the 1939-1940 World's Fair. I didn't know that. And that sculpture that Isaiah and Faith Bradley posed in front of, looking it up online, that it was Augusta Savage was the sculptor, and it was called Lift Every Voice and Sing. 16 feet tall and a symbol of African American music. And it was actually destroyed after the fair. It was just made of plaster. Yeah, it was just a proper. So you don't find a whole lot of it. It's not like you can get some new photos of it, but I thought it was really neat, and just the idea of them inserting that to give that historical reference, I thought was awesome. And the one thing I didn't understand though is you had that peep show hawker that was advertising for people to come in to the peep show, but then they wouldn't allow a black couple in. But weren't all of the attendees?
Okay, so when I read that, I think they implied that they crossed into a different area of the fair, and when they did, it's almost like the rules kind of changed, so maybe there was they don't say it outright, and I kind of, the first time reading it, I felt that way too. It's like, well, it's
I think everybody in the crowd
Negro Week. Yeah, everybody is, but I think if you actually look at the crowd, then you see that it's not. And I think that maybe they moved outside of the fairgrounds or one area or something like that.
Gotcha.
But that was, I think and I think that point was there just to kind of bring the issue to the forefront.
Right.
Because I actually read through this 3 different times before we recorded, so I feel pretty good about the story.
Well versed.
Yes. All right. Issue 2.
All right. It's May 1942. Early in America's entry into World War II, assigned to Sergeant Lucas Evans's unit at Camp Cathcart, Mississippi, new privates Isaiah Bradley and Maurice Canfield joined fellow Black Dog Faces Dave Plum, Jack Harvey, Jefferson J.J. Jameson, and sociopath Damon Larson in digging latrines for the war effort. The camp commander, Major Brackett, receives an official visit from Washington attaché Homer Tully and Dr. Josef Reinstein, a German psychiatrist and surgeon. The two men requisition several Negro soldiers for an experimental army project, then express the government's concern that other blacks on the base may pose a security threat. Negroes have their own secret means for spreading news by word of mouth, explains Tully. Among themselves, it's called the Black Vine. Consequently, Brackett orders a night training exercise for late that same day. When the men are assembled, the major is suddenly approached by an officer he's never before seen, but who is nonetheless familiar to the present Tully and Reinstein. Colonel Walker Price from military intelligence. Price hands over papers revealing the major of his command and shutting down the camp. When the incredulous Brackett protests, Price informs him that the Camp Cathcart was always a covert operation and publicly executes him. Price then gives his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Philip Merritt, orders to tidy up after him. Lucas and his men are stunned, even as they are randomly chosen by Merritt and herded into waiting transport trucks. As the trucks speed off, Lucas and his unit hear the distant gunfire of the massacre at Camp Cathcart.
I don't have a whole lot to add on this issue, though I don't think that Philip Merritt, given his stature and appearance, would have actually risen to the rank that he had in like a real army.
Yeah, probably not. I want to comment on, I mean, I don't have a whole lot either on this issue other than this is when you knew, oh, wow, this is some real stuff here. I mean, you had some bad things happen. When Major Brackett was killed by Colonel Price, I was like, wow.
Right.
And then the hint of just the overall massacre just to preserve and the secrecy of the project to those 10 soldiers that they were using. And then the Double V campaign, I looked that up too. That was something that was actually, you see it on the cover of the first issue. It's a tattoo on Isaiah, but it's also later on, there's a pamphlet that one of the characters is reading, but it's Victory Abroad and Victory at Home, which was a real thing. That was kind of the tagline for the NAACP and a black newspaper to kind of bring the social injustices and racism to to light. So I thought that was kind of just one of many good historical tidbits.
Yeah, let alone just the idea of the segregated army, where you had the black army camp and the white army camp,
Segregated blood, even. We could get into that later, I think.
Yeah. You mean the blood of a black person is the same as the blood of a white person?
Yeah.
We can't let people know that.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1,000 units of white blood.
Yeah.
Anything else for 2?
No.
All right, 3.
All right, issue 3. It's June 1942, and a secreted U.S. military installation, the Super Soldier Project, is in full gear. Sergeant Lucas Evans's unit undergoes a horrific series of clinical tests at the hands of Dr. Josef Reinstein, whose accelerated wartime trials and errors cut down the surviving black dog faces from the Camp Cathcart like wheat before a scythe. The prototype super serum has violently unpredictable results. The lovable Jefferson J.J. Jameson spontaneously combusts from overdosage, and as fate would have it, the sociopath Damon Larson is the first of Sarge's men to successfully endure the procedure. Evans and the rest follow suit, all becoming super soldiers. Meanwhile, the families of the men have received official letters of condolences from the Army, ascribing the loss of their loved ones to an accidental explosion. The news results in varying expressions of grief. In Cleveland, the Sarge's buddies remember him with drunken toasts. Maurice Canfield's wealthy Philadelphia parents bury what they believe to be their son's remains. and die in a murder-suicide soon thereafter. And back in the Bronx, the mourning Faith Bradley has a shock when she insists on opening her husband's casket. The test concluded. Colonel Walker Price informs Dr. Reinstein that the entire outfit is moving on to its next operational phase in Europe, where the Germans have their mirror of the project in full swing. The doctor protests the decision as premature. While held in steerage on their transatlantic journey to war, Evans tells his newly augmented men a harrowing story about his participation in national race riots on the heels of World War I, and Jack Harvey, one of his soldiers, dies with a feverish vision of African slaves during the Middle Passage, evident the serum might yet need perfecting.
Yeah, Red Summer is what those race riots were referred to, and that once again is something that actually happened, and that's something that it's kind of like whenever I saw Watchmen, the TV series, for the first time. It's like and the Tulsa event. Well, I had to go look this up as well and find out what was going on there, and it's just like you shake your head at our country's history from time to time. Some things that just aren't talked about or just aren't. I mean, you can't know everything about history, but my gosh, there's a lot of pieces that you really should take some time to learn about. So I'm embarrassed. I'm this old and just now hearing about it. So
yeah, exactly. That's the word I was going to use. Is that it's kind of embarrassing that we all came up. Well, Scott and I came up a little bit earlier than you did, Shad. But I mean, there are things in history that I would think warrant at least a page or two, and Tulsa's one of them. The Red Summer is also another one I was completely oblivious to.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they didn't change the teaching from yours to mine. I didn't. I just learned about
so that's a little bit disappointing, but I think maybe that things are turning around a little bit. This issue has the closest likeness, I think, when you're comparing the storyline to the Tuskegee study or the experiments on African American men injecting them with the venereal disease, syphilis, and then just kind of leaving them off. I mean, I know that was part of the inspiration for this, and it was about the same timeline. But what I didn't know is that, holy cow! I mean, it started in the 30s, but it really didn't end until like 1972.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
I thought it was really heart-wrenching to see the families notified of their loved one's death when they really weren't dead, at least not yet. And we're a non-explicit podcast, so I can't say what that lieutenant, what my description for him was, other than he was a jerk. And it's kind of notable that out of the 10 men that were injected with the experimental super serum, 5 of them died right away. So
not a particularly high success rate. So
no, and that's even more horrifying, is that they kind of knew, well, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's pick these black guys to try it on.
And this is me just having a hard time with timelines on this. Captain America already happened, yes or no?
It did. I'll let Scott speak to it.
Well, they actually, I think, deliberately leave that very vague.
Okay, alrighty.
Okay, now, I went into this thinking that for certain Steve Rogers was first, Isaiah Bradley was second.
Right.
They do a good job in not providing very specific dates in this, where it could go either way. I do, however, still think that in the Marvel 616 universe, that Steve Rogers was first, and that this was their attempt to recreate the super soldier serum. Because it wasn't Reinstein, it was Erskine, Erskin, who was then killed whenever Rogers got injected. And then both sides are trying to expand their super soldier serum, and it's a race to do the experiments, because they lost the guy who had it.
Yeah.
Kind of having to do the mass experimentation again, and then this is the group of soldiers that they went on trying to recreate the super soldier serum.
that kind of seemed to be the way, and I know we're kind of getting ahead of the end of it all and how that reveals, but we were talking about just the experimenting and not a high success rate is, well, they had a successful one already, or did they in this timeline? Yeah. But I that's how I understood it, is that Steve Rogers came before, and it makes sense that doctor died in that timeline, and so this would be trying to figure out how to recreate the success of the Captain America program.
Yeah, and then that's one that and jumping ahead to like issue 7, one of the things they talk about is the Germans and in the U.S. were working together until Hitler kind of messes things up.
Yeah,
but, I mean, if there hadn't been everything militarily going on in Europe, they might have continued to work together for an indefinite amount of time on these various programs. And in a sense, the U.S. got quote unquote lucky whenever they did the split, that Reinstein, who was German, decided to stay with the U.S. and then move the super soldier program forward. So,
yeah, I read somewhere, and I thought I wrote it down here as reference, but I can't find it. But I think the original intent was to make this story outside of the Marvel continuity, and then the decision was to put it in. So that created made it necessary to build that backstory or to show why, who came first and why. So,
and then another thing is that in some Marvel universes, Isaiah Bradley is the first Captain America.
Okay.
So in 616, which is the main Marvel universe, I still feel pretty confident Steve Rogers is first Captain America.
Yeah.
All right, Mike,
okay.
Issue 4.
Issue 4, The Cut. In July 1942, the super soldiers have halted a convoy in Germany's Black Forest, but they are dismayed to discover that they have succeeded only in stopping medical supplies from Koch Pharmaceuticals. 2 months later, in Central Portugal, only 3 soldiers remain: Bradley, Canfield, and Evans. The trio are discussing the uncanny parallels between comic book hero Captain America and their serum treatments when Merritt goads Canfield into a fight. While trying to restrain Canfield, both Evans and Canfield are killed, and Bradley is injured. Price tells Bradley his family's survival depends on the United States winning the war, and then describes a suicide mission that Steve Rogers would have taken in Germany were he not delayed by weather in the Pacific Theater. And you'll all notice that my summary or synopsis was a lot shorter than Chad's, but it's because I got mine from Wikipedia. Sorry.
Oh,
okay. You didn't just see Chad's been reading the summary from the next issue. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. To back it up there. So, but
okay.
That's all right. So, it works anyway. We get the story across.
So then it does state in there, I guess, that Steve Rogers is active simultaneously.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's apparently been, and again, but it's still muddy because they've also been active for a while.
Right. Yeah.
And we know that Steve Rogers is at least recently active. So they again, I think they make it kind of unclear, and I think it's deliberate. They don't just say black and white, no pun intended there.
Yeah.
Okay. That Steve Rogers was this date, and then this started on this date. So
it's very much Isaiah's story, and doesn't really, whatever's outside of his window is not really talked about. Which, did they ever say why they were testing on black soldiers first? Was it because they were more disposable?
Expendable, yeah. I think.
I gotcha.
Well, they didn't really say that, but it's
Tuskegee experiments took place.
Yeah.
So in theory, we could believe that Isaiah in this story at least is first, because he was ideally probably experimented on before a white soldier would have been given any kind of successful serum.
That's why I think they make it kind of, they have that gray area there.
Yeah, so because if you go by the story itself, I mean, Captain America first appeared in whatever month in 1940. This story begins in 1941. So if they would have said this is outside of Marvel continuity, no big deal. This is another universe or whatever.
Yeah.
But they decided to integrate it, which is fine too, because you get a great character we've seen this character in the movies, but so they had to kind of explain it that way.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, because they even imply that up until like the first Captain America was actually a fictional character, and that they made real, you know.
Right.
And then they in your thing you don't point out that Merritt is actually the one. I think it's implied that he kills Malcolm, though he takes a very brutal beating in the process. And to actually get that done. So and they also you mentioned that the double V, you notice that on Isaiah Bradley on his shield that he takes into battle, that double V is etched into his shield.
Mm-hmm. Do I need to go somewhere else to read a synopsis? I didn't. Where'd you say you get it?
If you want to go to the start of issue 6, you can read that synopsis for issue 5. But if you just want to use what you have, that will work as well.
My digital version doesn't have those next issue blurbs.
Oh, really? No, it's in issue 6 at the second page. It has the recap of what happened in the previous issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it'll take too long. We don't want to keep waiting. All right, so issue 5, The Math, and I think that's just a shortening of The Aftermath. In October 1942, Bradley steals the Captain America suit and parachutes behind enemy lines in Schwarzbiet, Germany, where he successfully completes the suicide mission to destroy a laboratory operated by Dr. Koch as a Nazi concentration camp. After killing Koch while seeking shelter from gunfire, he enters a gas chamber filled with women. The gas kills them, but only weakens Bradley, and he is captured. The story flashes forward to the present day and closes with Steve Rogers in conversation with a woman in a burqa who asks why Rogers thinks Bradley is dead.
And of course, everybody in the concentration camp, they have the numbers on their arms. So this is actually, a Jewish concentration camp.
Yes.
And again, kind of placing this in, in the real world, and things that actually happen. So.
This was a more horrifying. I mean, just the idea, Isaiah walking into the experiment on the Jews. It's pretty dark. But real.
Yep.
And it was a good issue for that reason, but man, it's tough to read.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it too much, a lot of this particular series is tough to read,
it's heavy for sure.
That is for sure. So I'm sorry, Shaq, go ahead.
No, you're okay. Him grabbing, stealing the Captain America suit in this issue, did that feel a little bit like out of nowhere, out of left field for anybody? Like that he was just all of a sudden breaking in, grabbed the Captain America suit, and now he's wearing it. Did that feel a little off?
It didn't to me.
Okay.
Because, it was the suit was there waiting to be used. It was intended to go on this mission, with Steve Rogers.
Yeah,
so
but he couldn't make it. Mm-hmm.
But Steve got hung up in the Pacific, right? So he couldn't get there in time.
Gotcha.
They had to get this mission accomplished. So why not use what it was intended to be used for? Plus, he was a fan of the comic book character because
that makes sense.
Sat there and saw him reading the comic. So I
just felt like I was like, okay. I was like, why didn't he just go on the mission without the suit? Was like in my head, like, what was the point of doing that? But I guess it makes for the story to go well as well.
Oh yeah, and it makes for a very powerful final image of this story of this series. Is what I think is, even if it was out of character, it's worth it for the punchline.
Yeah.
So, issue 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good. Okay. So it's the present. Steve Rogers is investigating the possession of a World War II era Captain America costume by a white supremacist leader held in federal custody, none other than the former Army Lieutenant Philip Merritt. After a few moments, Rogers deducts Merritt's treasonous involvement in the assassination of Dr. Jophus Reinstein and the destruction of the Super Soldier Project. Now a comic book retailer, Merritt identifies the Cap costume as a rare collectible. It's the one Isaiah Bradley swiped for his suicide mission to the Nazi death camp Schwarzbiet. Who, says Rogers, confused, don't tell me you haven't heard of Isaiah Bradley, Damian Spinrad, a black FBI agent. President Merritt's questioning asked the astonished hero. The black Captain America? Back in October 1942, a captured Bradley was brought to the Berlin headquarters of Adolf Hitler. Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, tried to sway Isaiah into becoming their poster boy for Negro discontent in America. Why do your people fight for them? The Fuhrer wanted to know. Why do you fight when they deny you the glory of this other soldier? No sooner did Isaiah decline the offer to join the Nazis, my wife would kill me, then Hitler and Goebbels decided to ship him off to the sinister Dr. Joseph Mengele in Auschwitz. However, as his transport to certain doom began early the next morning, members of the German resistance rescued the soldier. This idea of the Germans, and I'm trying to remember what I saw that it was in, but this is not the first time that I saw where Germany was appealing to black American soldiers to basically turn on their country, because if Germany won, then they would be treated better than how they're currently being treated. I want to say it was actually in the Black Lightning TV series.
Oh,
but
okay.
I can't swear to that, but
Yeah.
that's where I think I remember. So this predates that TV series, but I just thought it was an interesting point that they come back to, and again, I think it's one of those things that's actually based in fact. So
Oh yeah. I like the back and forth in scenes between the interrogation of Merritt by Cap and the FBI agent that was black, but his ancestors were German. So he's explaining to the racist Merritt that there were German Americans and they were, it was part of the German colonization of not Angola, but Namibia that caused that. And so in the 1940s and World War II, the Germans, the Nazis, were kind of on a fence about whether they could, if they trusted, or they had these German citizens, from way back then. Can we really say that they are a lesser race now? So I thought that was interesting as a oh boy, how do you say
justification?
Juxtaposition? Yeah.
Oh, juxtaposition.
Juxtaposition of that, and then they've got Isaiah. Hitler and Goebbels have Isaiah strapped down, and they're having these conversations. And I have to say that the rendition of Goebbels, he is a bad man. I mean, you can see the evil in that guy. So Baker did a great job with that.
All right, issue 7.
Okay.
So final issue of the series, and it's weird for a series to be 7 issues. I just want to comment on, but all right. So Steve Rogers confronts Colonel Walker Price. I'm not for sure if he was still a colonel at this point, but that's how he's known through the series, is Colonel Walker Price, at Arlington National Cemetery, and learns that the United States colluded with the Germans on the super soldier serum. When Hitler's hold took on Germany, the project split, and Reinstein stuck with the United States, and the race for the first super soldier was on. Price reveals many of the dirty details about the early days of the super soldier serum and how he turned his military career into a position at Koch Industrial. Steve Rogers, through his time in suspended animation, accumulated a massive amount in back pay, which he then used to buy stock options in Koch International, and plans to bring Price's war crimes to light using Philip Merritt as a witness against him. Rogers then proceeds to the Bronx, to the home of one Faith Bradley, wife of Isaiah Bradley. Here, Steve learns that Isaiah Bradley did survive his mission, but after the war was court-martialed for the theft of the Captain America uniform and spent 17 years in solitary confinement in Leavenworth. This time incarcerated, and the effects of the serum left a heavy toll on Bradley. Bradley was, however, pardoned during the Eisenhower administration. As Faith checks in on Isaiah, Steve looks at a wall of photos of Bradley with celebrity after celebrity, including Richard Pryor, Muhammad Ali, Bono, and even Stan Lee. When Steve Rogers finally meets Isaiah Bradley, the man with the mind of a child, Steve presents Bradley the remnants of the Captain America uniform after deeply apologizing to Isaiah Bradley for what he went through, and the two take another photo together for the wall inside the Bradley home. So, and that's that iconic, that excellent image that you get in that last page of this issue with Steve Rogers standing next to Isaiah Bradley, both in their respective Captain America uniforms.
So this is the issue that we learned that the super serum was discovered as the result of eugenics, which was, in the early 20th century was, that belief that the weak, anybody that's weak, whether it be mentally or racially or whatever, that they arbitrarily decided that they would be not euthanized. What do you call it?
Well, sometimes it was euthanized,
sterilized.
Sterilized.
Yeah. Sterilized, euthanized.
Their burden upon society. Yeah.
Yes. So it connected that to this. Best part was seeing Colonel Price go down. He even at his age, it was nice to see him. As much as any Nazi war criminal, it was nice to see him go down.
Yeah, not a lot of action in the final issue, right?
No.
But it does, wrap up the story very
it wraps
nicely.
up nicely.
Yeah. And this is a very, Captain America being my favorite character, right? This is a very authentic portrayal of Steve Rogers, right? And how you would think that he would respond in this type of situation. So clearly they have a strong grasp on the character, for this story. So it's really impressive to me. I love how this story just ties into Captain America's history. It gives that kind of at least parallel to events that are going on. Just really, really, really enjoyed that. So, do you guys have any final thoughts?
Other than saying it was just fantastic, it was everything I expected, really, because hearing you talk about it and just knowing from the general, just knowing about this story, it was just really nice to read. I think the only thing I really didn't like was the Quesada art on that first cover, a little bit over muscular, but overall this was, we'll get into grading, I'm sure, but you just don't get products like this very often.
Chad, final thoughts?
I was a little less positive about it. I don't think I like historical things. I don't think I like my comics based in any kind of actual any kind of reality.
That's okay.
But yeah. But the art stood out to me. Mostly positive, sometimes a little wonky, but mostly positive. I was into that a lot. It felt very important, in what it represents and what it stands for. No matter my feeling of liking historical stories, you can still recognize how impressive it is and how important it is to read something like this, for sure.
You said important. That's a key word. This was an important story.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we want to grade it. Chad, you want to go first on the grade? So
yeah, sure.
We go up from there.
Go up from there. Yeah. And it actually went up quite a bit as we talked about it. When we talk about things, it definitely lines some things up a little bit more. But I gave this a 7.5, a very fine minus. And most of that just being the fact that I'm not a big nonfiction fan.
Mike?
Well, I'm gonna break the 9 barrier and go 9.2. I think for all the reasons we've already discussed, I don't have to get into it again, but this was really good to read, and I sort of on the opposite of what Chad says, I love historical fiction. I love being able to cross-reference and say, oh yeah, that really did happen, and this is an interpretation of that. So, and I thought The art might have been something that was, if it would have been, I'd say a near mint or near mint plus if it wasn't for the art, I think. But again, it tells the story well. And I think really, even if I was at a certain level until that last page or two, but the positivity of that last page, like you said, Scott, with Steve Rogers and Isaiah Bradley together, arm in arm, and Bradley's, even though he's lost a lot of his wherewithal because of the non-treatment after the serum, he's just happy to be in that suit, that torn up suit. So yeah, 9.2.
Well, I'm at 8.5, very fine plus. And as much as I waffle back and forth on the artwork, at this point, I think if anybody else had drawn this, it would have been the wrong choice. This was the right creative team for this particular story. This is not artwork I would want to see on a book that I'm buying month to month, right? But
no.
For this story, it's perfect, and it's exactly how it needs to be. The tie-in, I like that it's not a history book, but it just gives you little glimpses of things in history, to kind of cement it into the real world and when things would have actually happened. So yeah, I'm a very fine plus. And I actually, what's bad is that's that grade for a book that I say I need to own, and I might have a trade of it someplace. I guess I need to see if I actually have the trade for it or not, because if I don't, I need to pick it up. So yeah. So all right, we ready to move on?
We are.
We good time wise? I mean, we've kind of gone a little longer, I think, on that one than what we maybe intended to. We good time wise? We okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we don't have to dig as deep into this one, though. It's going to be tough for me to not dig super deep into this. So I'll try to go fast in my little issue synopsis of this. So our other book for the evening is Rachel Rising Volume 1. This is, of course, a Terry Moore book. This is part of the Mooreverse. This was actually, for me, the first Terry Moore story that I read, and then went on to read some of the others after the fact. So I'm just going to dig into issue 1, give a real quick synopsis, then we can just talk about it. So, all right. So Rachel digs herself out of a shallow grave with a blonde-haired onlooker taking in the event. I'm going to refer to that blonde-haired onlooker here just as the blonde-haired voyeur, just because we don't learn her name in this story. So anyway, so Rachel manages to get home, and after showering, pays close attention to the damage done to her eyes and the strangle marks on her neck. She has flashes of a fight and being choked. She begins to piece together the timeline of what happened before those events, and remembers meeting her friend Jet, who at the end of the issue, she begins to try to track her down. All right, so issue 1. All right, short and sweet, right? Okay, so there we go. One of the things about these Terry Moore books, you could almost not read a single word on any of the pages and still have a really strong idea about what is taking place in these stories.
Chad, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not normally a big black and white fan of comics, but there's a couple of things that are the exception to the rule. Walking Dead is one for me. And usually if somebody is writing and drawing their own thing, if they are both the artist and the writer, they understand that story in a way that they don't need colorists to necessarily help move that story along. And Terry Moore definitely pulls that off for me. So that was kind of my introduction to this was, it's black and white, and then, this is good. It's kind of all in the same few pages right away. So, this first issue, I'm hooked and I'm in.
Oh, okay. I am going to say something. I was going to get this out of the way. I think that Terry Moore hates all other men. All right. There is I cannot
not a good
come
man
up
character.
with a single positive male character in any
Wow.
of his books. All right. They're all, it's all over the place. And, you can just kind of see, the one of the first, like the end of the issue, the brother, well, he's just this obese guy that just sits on the front porch apparently all the time. You got the mechanic who's hitting on the girls in the garage. Okay, I guess the closest thing in this entire series is the guy who randomly picks Rachel's up, takes her home, and then leaves. I mean, that's that's the closest thing to a positive male in this entire story. And you go read Strangers in Paradise, it's the same way. Motor Girl, same way.
Yeah.
There are not. So if you are somebody who can't accept that, you don't want to read anything by Terry Moore. I'm just gonna throw that out there to begin with. So okay, moving on to Rachel to issue 2. Rachel.
I just wanted to say about issue 1. I mean, I could apply this to any of the issues. Is that this is the cleanest drawn horror I've ever seen, and it really is horror because he does, like, the first several pages, there's not a single word of dialogue, and you can just see how messed up it is. It reminded me of Pet Sematary by Stephen King, her clawing her way out of the grave and all that. So yeah, it's I think what Chad said was that it hooked him, and it did me too.
So issue 2, Rachel visits her Aunt Johnny in the morgue where she works. Johnny speaks to Rachel, but it's as if she's not really there. The changes in Rachel even cause Johnny to think it's not actually her. Rachel basically drags Johnny out of the morgue and takes her to the place where she was buried. We temporarily switch over to Zoe, and I don't think we actually even get her name at this point, who actually finds the blonde-haired voyeur in her kitchen. Back to Johnny and Rachel, where they walk to where she was buried. They cross a field where in the past 100 women were hanged for witchcraft and then set on fire. As the pair arrives at Rachel's empty grave, Johnny thinks that Rachel is a ghost sent to help her recover her body, but learns then that Rachel is actually alive. Back to Zoe and her house, where her older sister comes home, whom Zoe similarly kills with a iron pan and then suffocates her.
That was, I have to say this before I forget, but I'm like, I've never thought of saran wrap being a murder weapon before. But then you think about it, if anyone's ever tried to, how the saran wrap will sometimes stick to the spool itself and not the edge, and trying to get that on. But you imagine that, trying to get that off your face. So I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible.
I've apparently watched too many TV shows where they put the plastic bag over somebody's head that I just need to get better, more positive TV to watch or something. Now, something else that it's not obvious when you meet these two characters, Jet in the first issue and Johnny in the second issue, because of their names and how they are drawn, it is not 100% obvious that both of those characters are female until later on calls Johnny Aunt, and then you see Jet later on when she's playing bass guitar, and you realize, okay, these are actually female characters. And I guess that, I don't know if that's something that Moore does deliberately or what for these characters, but it's it's just, you don't know, you're left a little guessing. And literally the first time I read this, I thought Jet was a guy. So at least until like the third issue or something like that, when it becomes very obvious, that's not the case. So
I'm a big fan of Aunt Johnny. I like her a lot. She's probably my favorite character in the whole thing. It's
kind of like reading the grandma in Once and Future, but a different style of cool character. Yeah.
About the time that the saran wrap murder happened, I was like, Scott recommended this book. I was like, got through issue 2 before I was like, oh wow, all right.
Well, yeah, okay, all right.
I'm into it, but I wouldn't have guessed.
Anything to add on 2 before I go to 3?
No.
All right, so in 3, Rachel finally catches up with Jet playing bass guitar in a bar. Rachel gets sick and vomits dirt and string. While she's in the bathroom, a woman enters, and Rachel, after touching her, speaks a dark prophecy over the woman, who leaves the bathroom shaken. Our blonde-haired voyeur also is in the bar, manipulates that woman's fiancé into thinking she is planning to leave him. The voyeur exits the bar to the roof, and Rachel follows her. Somehow, the woman appears on a neighboring rooftop, and as Rachel notices a fire in the distance, she is struck from behind by the falling body of the woman, the woman of the fiance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both fall to their seeming deaths. Switch over to Zoe, who has set her house on fire and is dragging her lifeless sister's body out of the home to the trunk of the family car.
Crazy issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've only had about four pages, maybe 5 pages of Zoe in this, but
Mm-hmm.
she's had a very dramatic impact
Yeah.
on the
Just love
reader. So,
watching her driving with a broomstick,
yeah.
trying to reach the accelerator. Yeah, there. The first, was this issue 3 or 2? Or
This was 3.
Three. So the first 2 issues were kind of a slow burn. They didn't have a whole lot happen, but this issue more than made up for it. It was just a lot of stuff going on. Just developments of Rachel going to the bar and where Jet's playing, and then you see that she's got stuff still in her system that she's throwing up, and then she's meets this woman who's so happy she's going to get married, and then she just blurts out how terrible of a future she has, and it comes out to be true.
Uh-huh.
And then seeing Zoe with her sister loading her up in the trunk, it's just a lot happened, and
Right.
it was a wow factor going on.
Yeah, we've got this weird B story of Zoe that we don't quite understand what's happening just yet.
No.
The action with Rachel's second death or whatever, I flipped through again. I was like, what happened? Is it what I think just happened? Did somebody just fall down and knock her off of the roof? And sure enough, yeah, that was exactly what happened.
That was it.
And I guess we find out that Rachel has some sort of power that she can see people's future or death or something, perhaps at this point.
Yeah. And it's implied that this is new since her coming from coming out of the grave, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, so on to issue 4. Jet and Johnny arrive to identify Rachel's body, but surprisingly find her alive, but with all the characteristics of somebody who is actually dead. Back to the fiance, who is now taking she's basically taking his I don't know what to call them, each other, fiance and fiance, right?
Yeah.
The male fiance takes the dead female fiance basically to the same spot where Rachel had emerged from the grave. As he is preparing to bury her, the female fiance's body is possessed by some type of snake before he actually is able to bury her. As he returns to his car is struck by another vehicle driven by Zoe, who then opens up the trunk and asks for his help to help dispose of her sister's body. Back in the morgue, Johnny, Rachel, and Jet they're just talking about Rachel's current situation, that, she's not dead, she is dead, whatever the case may be. Back to Zoe, who then kills the male fiance after he helped her bury the body. After leaving, Zoe then bumps into our blonde-haired voyeur, and who comments that she really doesn't think she's going to need her again, which kind of wraps up the issue.
I'm speechless at some of this, but first of all, it is crazy, and it just shows you the power of sequential storytelling with art. It's just, the dialogue helps, but you're right when you first said at the very beginning that Terry Moore has this knack for telling a story with his art, and that panel where Rachel just pops up in the morgue off the table and says Aunt Johnny, and scares the bejesus out of Aunt Johnny and Jet. And Jet says Mother Mary, Joseph, and the donkey. And you can imagine. I mean, you could see these things happen. No. And going on through it, I mean, just that poor guy fiance. I mean, he doesn't even know what he's doing and why he's doing it. Then he gets whacked. So Wow.
Yeah, it's just oh gosh, I had something I was going to comment on, and I I don't. Well, maybe it'll come to me later on, so I'll come back to it.
Is there a sign that says, "Hey, bury your bodies in the dried up creek bed"? Is that like?
Well, okay, no, but it's and I'm glad you said that, 'cause that reminds me of what it was I was going to say. There's this moment, right, in issue 2 where Johnny and Rachel are walking across that field, and it's just mentioned in passing. It's like one panel where it talks about that field where 100 women were hanged for witchcraft and then set on fire.
Okay, yep.
And all of they're all crossing that same field.
Yeah.
So, and this becomes significant, not so much in this volume, but in subsequent volumes.
Okay.
So it's like we just get 1 or 2 panels about it, but it actually is a lot of the backstory for why these events are actually taking place.
Well, I do enjoy that, we definitely started with everything being separate in one way or another, especially with Zoe and Rachel's story, and we're starting to see that crossover already in this as we're kind of wrapping up this first volume, and I dig that.
So on to issue 5. Yeah. You got anything else, Mike?
No.
Okay. So issue 5, Rachel awakens in Johnny's home, and Rachel and Jet reminisce about their friendship. So we get a little history about how long they've known each other. And Rachel basically retells part of the story about what she remembers, when she climbs out of the grave. And in fact, how she knew which way was up when she was digging and ran into another body, knew that she needed to go the other direction, right? So Johnny, however, Aunt Johnny brings in another older doctor basically to comment on Rachel's current situation, and yet another deviant man that we have inside of this story. All right. Back to Zoe. They are attempting to place Zoe in foster care, but in comes the creepy perv foster dad, who basically scares Zoe a little bit, though there is some type of supernatural intervention there. As Zoe escapes, the foster dad gets his head stuck in the elevator and is decapitated, which we see his lone head in the elevator as Zoe exits the facility.
As much as I love that scene, I thought, well, every elevator I've been in, I've seen you can kind of stop the closing of the door, but
right.
Still, you get the message. Yeah. He deserved it too.
Yeah. Well, there's some supernatural elements going on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So we can suspend that disbelief, there for
You're
just
right
a little
about
bit.
That. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But once again, multiple male, non-male positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't even, and before they get to the elevator, she doesn't push him physically across the hallway into that wall.
No.
Her arms don't come up at all. It just it says swag, which I guess is some emotion that's the onomatopoeia to it. So yeah, I'm definitely, she has some sort of powers that allows her to throw humans across an entire hallway, which means she could probably hold an elevator door closed with her mind as well.
And I don't know that our blonde-haired voyeur is not somehow involved in that, though we don't actually see her at this point, because a lot of things that are supernatural have been occurring. And I had to laugh because of the scene where he gets his head stuck and she just holds up her finger and then presses the button. It's just like, and you just see his eyes. Whoa! Oh my gosh. All right. Issue 6, last issue. Back at Johnny's house, they continue to discuss Rachel's current state of being. All right. Here, the dead, jumping back to our burial scenes, right? The dead female fiance has managed to dig herself out of her grave and is picked up by the creepy former army medic who attempts to diagnose her. Well, that creepy former army medic is then killed by that snake that pops out of her mouth, right? And finishes off the guy.
He says, trust me, I'm practically a doctor.
Yeah. Rachel and the crew return back to the scene of Rachel's second death, where she fell from the top of the building, and encounter both our blonde-haired voyeur and Zoe. Rachel learns that only she and Zoe are able to see are blonde, right? And also, as Rachel is talking to the blonde, and of course, I keep saying blonde, but Rachel's also blonde. So, as they talk, she sees the voyeur in a different appearance. Her clothes move from being modern clothes to being very puritanical or pilgrim-like garb before she vanishes. We go to the home of our elderly doctor friend who has planted on the couch apparently his deceased and embalmed wife, much like a kind of like a psycho mother type of a situation. Rachel and Johnny and Jet are then driving home, are involved in a crash. Rachel is thrown out of the vehicle, but she's actually run through by rebar, I guess is what was on the truck. Johnny, also ejected from the vehicle, is laying nearby with probably a broken back. And Jet, who Johnny comments that's too much blood, is seen bleeding out. Jet and Rachel exchange a few final words, and then Jet dies. Our final set of scenes for issue 6, we see Jet laying in the morgue for several panels until the final panel. Her eyes open, and we also notice that she now, in addition to having the eyes like Rachel has, also has the marks of strangulation around her neck.
The ligature marks, yeah.
To wrap up issue 6.
What do you think that's indicating? I mean, there wasn't any injury to her neck, so but
I've read
it, so
right.
Okay.
I've read.
Yeah.
So do you want me to comment?
No. I'm going to continue to read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So you like it well enough that you're going to keep going. It's only 6 more volumes, I think. So
yeah. It's good.
I was also confused by that because I was like, I had to go back and I was like, Jet's the only one with black hair, so that has to be Jet.
Yeah.
Back on there, and absolutely the neck marks got me as well, and I looked at the injury and I was like, has nothing to do with the neck. Why is this there? And so it definitely left me with a little bit of that mystery of what's going on.
Yeah. So okay, I won't say anything,
please.
looking forward, but having reread volume 1, I am also going to reread all the subsequent volumes
there you
as
go.
well. Forget about my to read pile. I'm rereading Rachel Rising again, just working through it. So, but I can't say enough about this story. The artwork is so incredible. It is. It sucks you in. It's an incredibly quick read. It's too quick sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like I want this to last a little bit longer. So I don't know what else do you guys want to add about this book?
The crows are a big imagery in the story, but aren't really pointed out for any specific reason. I'm curious to see if those kind of play in later on as well, or if they're just there because crows are creepy.
Yeah, gosh. I'm trying to remember if they have any specific impact, but it does have a lot to do with just the nature of the town, right? So it's there. So
it sounds like Stephen King type stuff. It really does, which to me is a positive. Okay. I thought it was a great story. The good pacing, like you were mentioning, it goes quickly, but then it's sometimes. I mean, it lets the character development. Build at a good pace, even though you're reading it quick. Well, I think part of the reason it gets a quick read is because there's not a ton of dialogue. You're relying on the art, and when you read it a second time, which when we do these books, I usually read them twice anyway. You're like, oh yeah, you just kind of absorb it, and it's got scary scenes, and it's kind of humorous at times. So yeah, this is all the right combinations.
All right, we ready to grade it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so who wants to go first? Mike, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it. Boy, I set the bar high last time.
Yeah, you did.
I like this enough to say 8.5, very fine plus. I don't need.
So what you're saying is you like Truth more than you like this?
I did.
Okay.
I like because of the historical stuff.
Okay.
It's sometimes, I mean, we all like our reading sometimes to be an escape,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what this is. It's just good horror, but at the same time, I love me some books, a story that's got historical roots. So
Okay.
that's where that bumps up truth.
All right. Shad, what about you?
I am also an 8.5. And I actually went up a little bit as we were talking about this. Which yeah, it's just bound to happen. I might as well just round up another like half a point when we talk before we even talk and just go. It's gonna end up there. And actually, I anticipate if I were to grade this after I already own all 7 volumes. So after I finish reading it, I kind of anticipate maybe even feeling more positive about this than I currently do. But as of just this kind of one volume that doesn't have a giant ending or a giant resolve at the end of it, or even any kind of high peak. It just kind of tells this linear story that's really cool. I think I will have even more positive feelings about this as I finish all of it.
All right. Well, I'm at a 9.2 on this story because one of my big concerns as we reread this, or as I reread this, like, man, is it going to hold up? Is it going to be as positive now as it was the first time that I read it? And it does make me want to go back and read the other remaining volumes again, just to refresh the entire story. I do own it. It's in my library. Not only do I have the trades, I've got copies of the first issue for my personal collection. So yeah, this is a story I love. It's one that's great to recommend to somebody who doesn't want superheroes, for somebody who wants like strong female characters, right? Or who wants like supernatural. It's a good recommendation for anybody who's looking for those types of reads. So
yeah.
All right, CLZ Shake. I'll go. I've got mine already, so I think I will shake and go. Oh, hey. So we actually talked about this book in, I think, maybe not the last previews, but the previews before. So this is Silver Star issue number 1.
Yeah.
And we talked about it because Tomorrow's just did a graphite edition of no, they did a graphite of Destroyer Duck, not this book. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I knew about the graphites because I have the graphite of Silver Star number 1. So, the entire Silver Star series, because it was only like 7 issues. So this came out from Pacific Comics. This was later in Jack Kirby's career, where he was going to some publishers that would basically let him own the characters that he was working with, and this is one of the characters he created. The Silver Star wasn't Homo superior like the mutants; it was Homo geneticus. So it was kind of a play on mutants going on to a different level. Lots of, if you've read any of the Fourth World that Kirby does, a lot of high language, tries to be high language in it, sometimes it falls a little flat, but this was actually, especially when you see it in pencils, I did enjoy this story quite a bit. So if you're a big fan, and especially if you can track down the graphite version of this more than the colored and inked version of this, I think it's a really, really enjoyable read. So, and thus it's in my collection for that reason. Who's next?
I can do it.
The Accelerators?
The Accelerators. This is issue 20, which is the new a new arc. It started. This is actually a book that I was going to suggest maybe we read the first volume of at some point.
I've never heard of it.
Really? It's an indie book by Blue Juice Comics is the publisher. The Blue Juice guys were the like producers and part of the crew for the Comic Book Men show, TV show. Okay. So they were like, and they had some of the guys, the crew from that have a comic book company called Blue Juice Comics. And so Accelerators was their first book. It's kind of a time travel story. You've got a deadbeat kind of guy that ends up somehow getting a hold of, I can't remember, this time travel device, but you can only move forward in time, if I remember right. Okay. But it's a pretty cool story, and it's on Comixology Unlimited and all that. So I would recommend it. I have all of the books of the Accelerators.
Is like Walt Flanagan involved in it?
I think he might have done some B covers and stuff,
Okay.
and but that's
So
about
not any of the main book. Okay.
No. It's drawn by Gavin Smith, which I really enjoy his art, and I've met him at a Comic-Con before, and kind of have kept up with his art and stuff that he's been involved with past the Accelerators.
All right, Mike.
Okay.
Go.
Convergence.
Oh,
That's
I'm sorry, Mike.
Convergence Justice League International Convergence was the non-event event. It was basically used to fill the gaps. It was a fifth week event to fill the gap with DC moving from New York to LA or where they were in.
Yeah.
Not what's the name? It starts with a B. Burbank. But it's I don't know. I'm sure I read it, but it's a lot of it's mostly just Elseworlds or alternative histories. And this is going back, reliving the Justice League International, which is great in and of itself. Ted Kord, Martian Manhunter, Fire, and Ice Star as the levity of the JLI team collides with the severity of the world of Kingdom Come. So I'm sure I had an order of what I liked best out of the Convergence titles at the time, but I have forgotten since then. This was written by Ron Mars, art by Mike Manley. But yeah, that's what it is. It was I don't remember much more about it. It was just one of those events that didn't have much consequence.
Yeah, I think the only significant thing that really came out of Convergence was Jonathan Kent.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, that's really the only significant thing that came out of that. So
yeah.
All right. So Shad, what's our next episode going to be?
We have previews next.
Woohoo! Surprise, it's already recorded.
I know. I want to say, oh my gosh, I got some work to do. I need to.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be ready in time. All right, Chad, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Me? You can find me on Facebook at Shad Schubert. That's ShaadSchubert. And of course, check out my band, Shad and Thomas.
Mike, what about you?
Email wise, it's m.atchison90@gmail.com. And on Twitter, it's Mike Atchison5.
And I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at bergcomics.com with links to my Facebook multimedia. Stop in the shop. Check out some of my dollar books. And of course, you can email all three of us at podcast@bergcomics.com. And we'll be back soon with previews.
All right, this is 152, correct? Yes, that is correct. Okay. For real this time. For real this time. Yes, for real this time. Okay. Well, you guys get your drinks? You ready to start? Yep. Look it up before we get this going. I just got some water. I just have a Cherry Coke Zero and water myself, so. Well, there's one around here, but I mean. Okay. We good? Yep. Okay, so welcome to episode 152 of the Campus Comics Cast, where you can feel free to share your podcast. Start over. I can't. Well, I don't have like sketches of my notes here, so it's just like I don't have a whole intro. I'm just trying to wing it. So.